I actually think I can start and tell a bit about the speakers we have here, the amazing panelists, and Cornel will be joining us soon. So I'm going to start with Ayu Abdullah, who's a executive director at Energy Action Partners. And although she's an aerospace engineer by training, which is amazing, Ayu has spent over 10 years as an energy access practitioner, focused on collaborative energy planning within renewable energy mini-grids. And she's also the co-founder and co-executive director at Energy Action Partners, an international energy access organization that has developed an innovative simulation-based mini-grid planning tool, Codette. And you're going to find out more about this during our session. Beatrice Ionascu, she is the co-founder and CTO of imagiLabs. Beatrice, so imagiLabs is a startup empowering and equipping the next generation of female technologists. And you might be familiar with their devices, the imagiCharms, which caught everyone's eyes, I think, just about a year ago. Beatrice is an advocate for diversity in tech. She has previously co-founded an organization for women in STEM and is now continuing her work by inspiring the younger generations through imagiLabs. Engineer and entrepreneur, Beatrice believes technology education is the key to a better world. And she holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the New York University, Abu Dhabi, as well as a Master of Science in Machine Learning from KTH, Royal Institute of Technology. We also have with us Zilla Arach, Chief Product Officer at EzyAgric, Software Engineer. Zilla is the Chief Product Officer at EzyAgric, an agtech startup which focuses on the digitalization of agricultural value chains. I don't know what's wrong with me right now. Can't talk anymore. An engineer by profession and an advocate for diversity in STEM, Zilla has extensive experience in the field of information technology. She is passionate about data science and how it can be used to generate solutions to real-world problems. She's eager for knowledge, holding a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from Busitema University. She has also completed postgraduate studies at the University of Texas at Austin. Hopefully Cornel will also be with us soon, but I'm gonna read his bio right now. So he's the CEO and co-founder of Lumen, Empowering the Blind. Cornel is a Romanian inventor, speaker, and entrepreneur. He has funded Lumen, a startup designing glasses that empower the blind to live a better life. Previously, Cornel operated as head of innovation in Continental, one of the largest automotive suppliers in the world. For his work, he was nominated as one of the 10 standout members by Forbes USA in the first Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe, and is the first Romanian to ever receive JCI's 10 Outstanding Young Persons of the World Award, an award previously won by personalities such as John F. Kennedy or even Elvis Presley. And I actually think we can start talking about a bit about your businesses and what they do, because we have a really interesting mix for you today. We actually have some of the startups are working on technologies, some of the startups are working on the intersection between technologies and other fields. And some of the startups are focused on B2C, some are focused on B2B, some have a mix, and we even have B2G, business to government. So I'm going to start with Ayu, who can tell us a bit more about her business and about Codette.
Thanks, Silvia. So my name is Ayu. Hi, thanks everyone for having me today. So yes, I'm the co-founder and co-executive director at an international organization called Energy Action Partners, or ENACT for short. We work in the energy access space, so mini grids for off-grid and rural areas in developing countries. And our flagship program is COMET, or Community Energy Toolkit. And what it is it's a software-based simulation of a mini grid system. And what we do is we take it into rural communities and have workshops with them so that they can, use the simulation to experience a mini grid system. And what it's for is so that we can actually communicate really technical concepts to them and learn from them also about how they would use electricity, what they want to use electricity. So we've created this tool in our, sort of from our perspective, and our experience working with communities to really be a mini grid planning tool that project developers can take into communities. But I think what's interesting about Comet is that while it's a technology, it's not meant to actually replace any human interaction. What we're trying to do here is actually enhance human interaction and communication. We're currently a nonprofit organization, but we're actually moving towards transitioning into a startup that can continue with Comet product development.
That's going to be really interesting in our talks later on. Beatrice, how about you? Can you tell us about imagiLabs?
Yes, of course. First of all, thank you for the invitation. And hello, everyone. So imagiLabs is a Swedish edtech startup on a mission to diversify the tech industry, just like Codette. And although our approach is slightly different, so we are focusing on increasing interest among middle and high school girls by creating a community and tools for them to learn programming. So we launched our first product, this programmable accessory. It has a lot of LEDs that you can program from your phone. We launched it last year, just when COVID took over the world. And we are a B2C first startup. So we're mainly marketing and selling to girls and their parents. But we also have B2B partnerships with nonprofit organizations and tech companies, and hopefully schools one day.
That's amazing. And I really hope you reach all the schools because you have an amazing product. Can't wait to see it there. Zilla, how about you? Can you tell us a bit about EzyAgric?
Hi, guys. I'm called Zilla Arach Mary from Uganda. I thank you, Silvia, for the invitation. So what EzyAgric does, we simply want to make sure that food is available. So we use technology to make sure that that is met. So what EzyAgric does, through our proprietary product, EzyAgric, we're able to digitize the agricultural value chain. So we look at from the production to the marketing and the financial aspect of agriculture. So you know that predominantly in Africa and most parts of the world, agriculture is like the largest employer of most of the force. So with that, we're able to, so what people do, you download the app. At any one point, you're able to access genuine inputs, and then you get advisory. So with our machine learning algorithm, we're able to predict yield for the farmers and know when they're supposed to harvest. Then we link them to the buyers. Then after buying, for those who want to access loans during the course of the growing season or outside the season, they're able to do that all through EzyAgric. So we provide that one-stop center for the farmer to use right from production to the marketing. Yeah. Thank you.
You have such an interesting program. And I find it really interesting because it's at the intersection between tech and agriculture. And you will have some specific problems about during this panel. I can't wait. And I already said the bio about Cornel. I see he's joined us now. And Cornel, can you tell us a bit about Lumen?
Sure, and thank you for having me. Hopefully you can hear me and you can also see me. Sure, Lumen is a startup which builds assistive systems for the blind. Basically, if you look right now at the world, there are 40 million blind people. And if you look at the solutions for them, unfortunately, there are not that many. When it comes to mobility and orientation, actually getting out of the house and doing something new, moving, traveling, etc., there are only two solutions and they're thousands of years old. And that is the white cane for the blind and the guide dog. Now, because of multiple drawbacks, the guide dog, unfortunately, there are only 20,000 to 40 million blind people, even if it is the best and most used mobility solution for the blind. And so we're mimicking what a guide dog does. We're using autonomous driving technology minimized into a wearable product, which brings the same benefits as a guide dog, but in a package which can be scaled to the other 39,980,000 people in the world, which don't have an advanced mobility solution.
That is so interesting. And it's so interesting that it's in this field. I mean, traditionally, people with disabilities have been largely ignored by technology. And in the past years, we have seen an uprise in accessibility and in making tech more inclusive and making everything more inclusive. And I think that is key to having a more diverse voice and having more ideas, having more innovation. And I can't wait to hear your point of views on the next topics that we're going to discuss in this panel. So generally speaking, I'm really curious on how COVID has impacted all of your businesses. And since last time I started with IU and we finished with Cornel, maybe this time we can start with Cornel and go the other way around.
Sure. So how did COVID impact our business? Lumen was actually transformed from a research project to a startup exactly at the beginning of the pandemic. So we're basically a 100% pandemic startup as an entrepreneurial project. Everything we did, all the big rounds we raised and all of the development which we had recently was during the pandemic. It's incredibly hard to build hardware during the pandemic, but it's even harder to test during the pandemic. So we are testing with over 200 blind individuals, and that means an immense risk for us and for them. This meant that we had to completely rebuild everything we ever thought about testing to make environments safe, to really make sure that all of the people who are coming into our testing environments are at the safest as they can be, as for us as well. Statistically, I think we had 20, 30, even 40 people which had COVID in the moment we tested our systems on them, and maybe we just didn't know. Luckily, we didn't take it from them. So apparently it worked. It's incredibly difficult to do things during, especially hardware and testing during this time. But apparently we are succeeding. It costs us a lot more than it should. It takes a lot longer than it should. And it's a lot more work than it should. But we got used to it.
Zilla, how about you? I'm really, Zilla, I'm really curious about you because you actually work with people who are not in tech, and I'm curious how you tackle those situations and what interesting situations have appeared.
True, thank you. So we have both positive and negative impact of COVID. Starting with the positive, during the lockdown, so most of the movements were limited. So it's at that point that people appreciated the use of tech. People started looking for online solutions to access the services that previously they had to travel long distances to get. So on that fold, we saw a very high increment in the demand of our product, our app, EzyAgric. And so we're able to sell, like the volumes of inputs that were being traded through the app significantly increased. The number of people using it, we saw the engagement times increase significantly from the side of the farmers. But those were mainly I would say the farmers who have the smartphones, who are a bit literate. Now, on the side of those who are not literate, we usually use agents to reach out to the ones who don't have access to the smartphone. So we train them to use the app, and then they go ahead and assist the community. So they are community agents. So they go ahead and assist communities to post their produce so that buyers can see. They're able to receive the weather predictions, the yield predictions, and then relay the information to the farmers. So on that side, it was a bit hard because our movements were limited to the rural areas because the pandemic and the impact was more on the urban side than the rural side. So we saw so many communities stopping us from accessing them because they didn't want the spread. But also on the other side, because in our country, agriculture was considered one of the essential services. So we had to kind of figure out, pivot, and then we found a way of reaching. But we saw an increment that delivery time, like we usually deliver between 24 to 48 hours for every order, but some could take up to a week because the transport cost increased. And then when it came to testing the product for all the changes that were meant to launch the next version of the product, but because we're focusing more on the rural side and the testing group were mainly in the rural side, so we had to delay. Sometimes we had to incur the cost of housing them for us to get to get the results wanted from the test. So I would say it was both on both sides, the negative and the positive.
Thank you for exploring both options. And right now I would like to jump to Ayu and then to Beatrice, because I know Ayu has a similar enough experience. Maybe you can talk about it. Also,
Yeah.
Ayu is in Malaysia, so I don't know, maybe everyone can also say where they're from. So we have a lot of different time zones here. It's amazing.
Yeah. So our team is based in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and actually last year when the pandemic started, our projects were spread across 3 countries. So spread across Malaysia, Myanmar, and Indonesia. And you know, the main sort of like core work that we do is actually working very closely with rural and off-grid communities, which are oftentimes in very remote areas. And so similar to Zilla, we had a lot of problems because we couldn't travel. Malaysia has been our borders have been closed since March of last year. So it's been 1 year. And so we have been unable to travel to both domestic and international project sites. So it's really impacted us in that sense that we aren't able to travel to our project sites. What it has enabled us to do is actually shift our focus and work more on the product development and software development, which we weren't able to do before because we were always focused on doing projects because we are grant funded. So that it's given us the time to actually do that. So we've actually come a really long way, and we've actually also been focused on business development. So kind of pivoting to our startup a lot sooner than we had kind of planned. But still, right now, you know, we've had a lot of trouble just because we aren't able to reach our project sites and deploy our product. We've had to work closely with and remotely with partner organizations in those countries to work with them to deploy our product, and it isn't the best experience, although you know, it's worked, and we've been able to do our projects that way. Yeah.
I'm really glad that tech helped here, and I'm really glad you're developing really awesome programs with this. I want to jump now to Beatrice, who's from Sweden. Oh, in Sweden right now. She's from Romania. And maybe she can talk a bit about her experience with the pandemic.
Yeah, so in our case, we have a product that can really fit into this mostly digital and housebound life that kids and teenagers, well, all of us have during this period. So I think in that sense, it was an opportunity for us. And I think for parents too, it can really be a blessing to have a product that they can buy for their child to keep them occupied and engaged. And it's also an educational product. And I think in general too, with this like huge changes that COVID-19 brought into our lives, everything is becoming more digital. And I think remote learning has been is now more accepted, even if we like it or not. And more parents are understanding that technology is the future, which in our case is really great because it means that more parents are inclined to invest in their children's technology education and buy our product. But of course, we can't forget that during this period, people have been under more stress, often financial stress. So the market is not the same, and people's propensity to purchase is very different. Actually, perhaps even more so in the case of organizations that are faced with uncertainty and less willing to purchase tools like ours. Yeah, it's hard to compare because we launched during COVID, so we've had we can't really compare to a non-COVID world. And we also had to deal with similar problems like were mentioned by Cornel, like delays in manufacturing, supply chain. Luckily, we had finished our hardware development process just before the start of COVID. So it's been mostly waiting for things to arrive in Sweden from our manufacturer and then trying to get our product out to our customers.
I find it amazing that I actually think that you found the right time for this, and especially since, as you mentioned, all parents actually need this at this time. So I want to sum up a bit about each and every one of your companies and startups. So Beatrice is B2C, business to customer. IU is B2B, and basically business to business in the new transition. Zilla is both B2C and B2B, and Cornel is actually in the B2G part in the, yeah. So I find it very interesting that we have a lot of diverse opinions and diverse backgrounds here, talking about how the pandemic affected you. I also want to ask you about if there have been any political or economical or social barriers that you had to overcome. And maybe you can start.
Sure. I think, well, for us, you know, we've had projects actually funded by governments, and so we've had government funding, both from our government and also governments abroad. And because of COVID, there are a lot of government services that aren't working, and it's not just in sort of developing countries, but actually all around the world. A lot of the government services that we normally deal with aren't working. And so that's really affected our projects and payments. That's like the first thing that it affects. But there are also other barriers that we're dealing with. Zilla mentioned that, you know, some of the communities have been stopping people from going in. We've had communities that have set up blockades. And so, you know, nobody is able to go in communities. And it really does also, just like Zilla said, the communities that are very remote are usually self-sustaining. And so they're fine. But the communities that are closer to the urban areas and depend quite a bit on sort of the economic activity between town and rural areas, those are the harder hit communities. In Malaysia, our response initially to the pandemic was it was a bit of a scary response. Actually, our lockdown was one of the most strict lockdowns, I think, in the region. For our rural communities, the army was actually deployed to prevent them from leaving the community. So the blockade wasn't really necessary, considering the army had been deployed. But we had a lot of people kind of messaging us and you know, afraid, because they didn't really quite understand what was going on, because they don't get the same kind of information that we do in the urban areas. So we've had to actually, in the last year, also shift some of our project activities to not just be working on energy, but also kind of providing some of the more basic services, food supplies, information services, communications, things like that.
I think that's really, really hard to be so close to these communities and actually be there at the forefront and fighting for them and feeling when they're scared. Zilla, can you also talk a bit about your experience with these communities?
So ours was both from the COVID side, but even like the political side. So it was around the same time that we had elections, like change of elections, and there was a lot of political upheaval in the country, to the point that I think for a whole week we were like, that the government turned off internet. I mean, we were cut off from the entire world for a whole week, because it was during that time that we were preparing for elections, and one of the opposition leaders, I think, already had an app on Play Store that they wanted everyone to download and then track the results as they came in. So the government didn't want that to happen. So they turned off internet, literally. So you could not download the app. Yes. So for that entire time, no one was downloading the app. No transactions were coming through from the app directly, except through phone calls. And when they finally turned the internet back on, they still regulated. They stopped still Play Store because they didn't want anyone to download the app. So we had to transition to using VPNs. But for some of you who have used VPNs, you know that it's not very efficient. Sometimes when you're downloading, when you install, then you're trying to download the data. It takes quite a lot of time. Then sometimes you don't get a customer's information. So that was actually, it was a trying time for us. It was early this year in Jan, where we had to resort to calling like the clients who are using the product by just telling them, just make phone calls, just make phone calls. It was actually more on the negative side, even compared to COVID itself. I think it was one of our worst start of the year. Yeah, but yeah, we survived. We adapted.
Oh my God, that is so harsh, and I can't imagine what you went through. And I don't think anyone here can imagine life without internet. We actually had a speaker earlier talk about, hey, we need to remember our privileges in these times and think about how we were actually privileged to end up where we did and how we have to use that privilege to help others. And I am pretty sure you had to get really creative to go around all these barriers.
True, very creative. Like at some point, like everybody, like even we got some engineers who are working on the product directly to start calling the clients, because we had to we had to minimize the impact of not being online, literally, both from the B2B and B2C. No one would post anything. Just imagine the days, let me say in the 90s or late 80s, before the internet era. How actually I got to wonder, how were people working before the internet era? What were they doing exactly? Yeah. So yeah, you're right. You need to appreciate what we have.
Wow. So I like how you managed to solve these problems creatively. I'm gonna go to Cornel now, because although he doesn't work with rural communities, I know he works with governments, and I'm really interested to hear from him on this matter. So any political, economical, social, governmental problems you had?
Oh, just a few. So basically, when you are doing something which is at to some point related to the health ministries in multiple countries, especially during this time when, of course, priority is given to something else, and especially during these times when you can't really make sure that the same people you're talking to are going to be there tomorrow, it's very challenging. So we had discussions with people in very high positions, which afterwards basically they left because they couldn't handle the situation or in their country or the things which were going on with the pandemic, and that really is troublesome for what we're doing. Otherwise, it's actually not that right. There are so multiple instances of this happening, even these days it's happening. So definitely it's affecting us. But again, we're in a tragic situation. The pandemic is still here, and what we are developing hopefully reaches markets in the moment when the pandemic is kind of toned down. We will reach market most probably sooner than the pandemic we're gonna go over, but let's see, hopefully the vaccinations and everything can go fast enough so we can solve this as well. But it is affecting us. It's really affecting our pre-sales. It's really affecting our pipelines and everything. But we after twice and 3 times we begin learning about it and how we can manage it.
That's great. And I know it's a learning curve. It's there for everyone. It's good that you're managing. Beatrice, you wanna share some thoughts about this as well?
Yes, I can try. I'm not sure if what I have to add compares with what we just heard. I definitely think we were probably the least affected among what you heard from the other panelists, since our business is not really dealing with the government or severely affected communities like rural communities. And also perhaps because we're in Sweden, which has kind of tried to stay open as long as possible, perhaps in order to allow businesses to continue operating. So I think we are privileged in that sense. And I can only say that I'm really, really impressed with everything that Ayu, Zilla, and Cornel have talked about, and how, just you haven't stopped trying to overcome the challenges, no matter how big they are.
Yeah, and I actually like that we talk about an intersection between different domains and how we have IU for the energy sector. We have Zilla at the intersection of tech with agriculture, Beatrice at the intersection between tech and education, and Cornel, who is working to make this purely tech device for people with disabilities. And we have the intersection of tech and so many of these different domains who have been, which have been affected differently. And also the end users are the ones who actually influence a lot your businesses. So maybe we can talk a bit about the intersection between tech and the domain that each of you chose. Let's talk about how things can get complicated because there's this intersection here. Beatrice, do you want to start?
Yes, in the case of education, as I mentioned already, things have been moving a lot more to digital. And in our case too, we've transitioned into running a lot of events online and using, trying to use our tools with participants in workshops who are all around the world. So it's definitely been an opportunity to think like more digital and how can we use our tools mostly digitally. I do feel like from a product development perspective and testing, it's much harder for us to get input from our users. So as I mentioned, we have an app and we're constantly developing it. So it's really hard, especially with this like teenager age group, to get them to talk to you and give you feedback if you're on a video call, which it's more artificial, let's say, than meeting somebody in person. Although for teenagers, this is their reality, I guess, more than ours. So it's been just a lot of learning and trying to deal with the current constraints.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that because you're also developing the hardware, so that must be really tough.
Yes. So we do have a hardware product, but luckily we had just finished the main, let's say, hardware development just before COVID hit. So we're producing our devices in China, and we were just about to start manufacturing when COVID hit China. So we had some delay. And then, of course, that delay kind of trickled down into the supply chain and getting our product here to Sweden and then starting to fulfill our pre-orders. But then I would say maybe our pre-order customers were more forgiving because of the circumstances. So we could, we got away, let's say, with kind customers. And now these days, it's mostly the logistical side that's, let's say, affected, because everything else we can rather easily do from home. So we've just been rotating with who goes to the office. We try to combine working from home and from the office, and who goes in to fulfill orders and things like that need to be done from the office.
I can understand perfectly what you're saying about about people who need to be understanding with each other in these trying times. We've actually had some similar stories in Codette with events that were planned and had to be postponed, and our partners were very, very understanding with us, and also the community. And I don't know how we would have survived without this support. I'm pretty sure regarding the hardware that Cornel has a similar story about how tough it is to develop it, although I think he's still in development. Cornel, can you talk a bit about that?
Specifically about developing hardware during the pandemic, or about where we are in the development?
Where we are, and also what is like, what are the challenges you face at the moment with development, especially when you have hardware involved?
Well, the challenges which are facing now are not particularly related to COVID. I mean, of course, COVID is a grand challenge, but particularly where we are at this point, it works in terms of COVID. We found ways of working. are not specifically related to what we develop, but are related to the normal design for manufacturing process of hardware components, especially on very complex hardware components as we have. So we are doing the design for manufacturing, which is this phase after prototyping, after having everything done. And before manufacturing, you need a few months, like 6-9 months, up to a year, even more, to set up everything, from taking something which you can prototype and like build hundreds of them to something you can build tens of thousands of them. And that means you take each individual component and you redo it, and you really think about all the process in manufacturing and assembly and everything. And then you begin discussing with the factories, you begin searching for what are your partners which will help you manufacture it. And it's a large process. However, it's a normal process. It has been done before. We all have thousands of things around us. So it's nothing, it's not rocket science. It just takes time. Luckily, we have some of the best people in Romania, but I would say more than Romania, but we have some of the best people, the best Romanians doing this. And it's going smoothly. We have people which have shipped millions, actually tens of millions of products before in our team in Lumen. We have people which have developed electronics for satellites, for space applications. So there's actually Romanian electronics in space at this point. And we're lucky to have those people on board. So the challenges we have now specifically are not necessarily related to COVID or to anything which is not normal for designing hardware. Maybe a couple of things which we do have or they are challenging in our application specifically. First of all, what we're developing for people without sight. And that really is a bit different than you would expect. For example, I remember the first time we're doing the industrial designs, I think we had 49 or 50 industrial designs which we built to really select which ones are the best. And out of them, we selected 10 of them, we prototyped all of them. And we individually selected the ones which we like, but we like them because of their visual appeal, not because of how they worked. And then we gave them to blind people, and we actually, the ones which were winning were not the ones which we were expecting to. Second thing, when you're designing something which you actually wear, like a wearable product, there are a couple of things. For example, no two humans are alike. Anthropometrically, the science of measuring human dimensions, no two humans are alike. And when you're trying to develop a product which fits every head, in our case, it's like designing a shoe which fits every foot. It's basically impossible. But with a lot of working and a lot of stealing from other great designs and a lot of prototyping, you get there. So I think that would be the challenges for hardware design for us. Otherwise, of course, we have so many sensors, so many optical sensors, cameras, other types of electronics, batteries, everything that you find in a smartphone, we also have there, and then some. And we don't have 4,000 people working on this. We have 40 people working on this. So we're just 100 times more efficient. Or we'll have a product which is 100 times worse, let's see.
What about testing? Testing all this hardware?
Well, it's one of the most expensive things. People developing hardware definitely know that prototyping is expensive and testing is expensive. So, I mean, you have regulations and you have limitations and you want to make sure the device works in them. So we have a lot of testing systems developed specifically to test those. I'll not go into detail, but a lot of us are coming from the automotive world where development and testing are hardcore, very serious things. And we take the same mentality. So basically we test in the same way we're testing in the same way we were testing components for the automotive world and trying to test with the same mentality. The mentality is that if we fail, somebody dies. This is the mentality coming from automotive. It's not in the case of our product. By the way, it's designed and by the way, it's interacting with humans. The human is in control, not the system. So there are no regulation issues in that direction, but still we are developing it as good as we can as if life depends on it.
That's
and
very
testing it the same way.
nice to hear. Yeah. So going now to Zilla and changing a bit, because you have the intersection between tech and agriculture. And I know you've told us a bit about the struggles with tech separately and the struggles in different rural communities where you go. But I don't know, can you talk a bit about where these two meet at the middle? Have your tech plans, did they go faster than maybe the plans to actually deploy, or how has this part been affected?
So generally, the agtech space is just developing, I think both in Uganda and the other parts of, I think I would say Africa, most of the tech products are developed not specifically for the rural setting. So that means if you're trying to, I remember the first time we deployed, that was in 2015, a massive deployment in the field. And some of the farmers were asking us, so can I grow something on my phone? Like weird questions you get. So people, so the bit of, it's progressive. So the bit of tech in agriculture it's challenging given the customer segment and the nature of their life, behavioral change that is required. Many are not yet tech savvy. So you're going to, before you actually train them to use your app, they need to appreciate a smartphone, a basic smartphone. That is from the side of B2C. B2B is a walkover. That one is a walkover. So you need to first train them how to use the app, the smartphone itself. And then you need to, I would say, geofence, like in every area, we know which specific zones within a certain village that has good network. So what we did, we designed our product in such a way that as an agent who is trying to send either an order or try to relay information to the farmers, they're able to bulk, like aggregate all the orders from the farmers and then reach a certain specific location and then push the orders to us. So we had to do a bit of some feasibility study within the different areas, and then the training costs, of course, are high, which in one way or the other we pass on to the customers, but the training costs are high for people to first appreciate the tech. But also what I learned is it's very easy for tech to be adopted as long as it solves a real challenge and people see the value that is trying to provide, and they put in the effort for them to learn, because at the end of the day, these agents are paid on commission. They're like our sales agents. So they're paid on commission for whatever services they deliver to the farmers. And then also because we don't provide these phones to them, the handsets, they have to buy them. So we had to partner with the different telecos and other organizations to provide some of these products on loan to the farmers and the agents. Yeah, but the underlining bit is there is, compared to when we started, there is a trend of people appreciating now tech in agriculture. People are seeing the actual value, the transparency that is creating, the convenience that comes with using, for example, EzyAgric. Instead of someone traveling like 50 kilometers just to come and get a product, they're able to order it from the convenience of their farm and then have it delivered. Instead of someone calling to find out what is the price of my coffee, they're able to see that on the app at zero cost for now for such information. Yeah, so there's the challenges are still there, and probably it will take another 5 years for us to see significant change, especially in the deep rural areas, because some are even infrastructure that requires the government to come and set up boosters to improve on the network coverage, like such things. But what we do, we try to design the product to cater for that. Like someone can be able to do a lot of things offline and then update. Yeah, but our greatest challenge, what we anticipate, is when we roll out the AI models. That's by the fact that they are heavy, so it requires for someone to be online, and then we don't have to like develop and put the entire model in the app offline to make the entire app like very big. So those are some of the challenges that we anticipate, and we are trying to see which type of customers to first roll that out with before we go into the deep rural areas. Yeah, but yeah, so we're kind of figuring out how to handle some of the challenges.
I'm really curious about these AI modules that you mentioned. They sound really interesting. And I think everyone wants to learn more about them. If you want to say 2 words about them.
Okay. Yes. So what has been happening, we have been receiving like hundreds of calls from farmers. So, I mean, the garden, this is they take photos. They send through the app, they take photos, send through the app, and then they tell, okay, I don't understand what's happening in my farm. What is affecting my plants? So what we have done now is that every farmer using the app, you can be able to take a photo, an image of the plant, and then the app will be able to diagnose and tell you what disease it is. So we have basically used image processing to be able to come up with the algorithm to detect diseases in the different crops in the field. Yeah.
This is amazing, actually. And I don't know, all your efforts of digitalization and education, I think they're going to pay off for years to come. It's
yeah,
inspiring.
Definitely, definitely.
I'm going to be moving on now to Ayu, who can talk about the intersection between tech and energy and how they are affected.
So the energy access space is a kind of like an interesting space here because it's really an overlap between two sectors. So it's the energy access space is an overlap between the international development sector and the renewable energy sector. And it's kind of, this is one of the reasons why there hasn't been enough investment going into this space to really electrify the remaining 770 million people worldwide, is because we kind of belong to neither and both at the same time. So you have a lot of investment coming from the international development space, and their funding is mostly to just put in connections, just electrify at all costs. And by electrify, it can mean something as simple as giving a solar home system or a solar light, and that's considered electrified. Now, the renewable energy space, on the other hand, is pushing for the transition, the energy transition, and sort of trying to push the story that, you know, the people who are still without electricity, there's this huge opportunity to connect them using renewable energy. They're both correct. But the problem is they have to work together. And this main issue really trickles down to every location, every country. It's the same thing. Rural areas are unelectrified because do they belong to does the work belong to the portfolio of the Ministry of Rural Development, or does it belong to the Ministry of Energy? And so you have investment coming from both ministries, usually in all countries. However, the knowledge and the capacity that is really required to electrify these areas really sit with both ministries. And as we all, I think this is kind of worldwide, ministries don't coordinate and work together very well. And so you get this problem all around the world that rural areas, you know, if there's a coordinated and concerted effort at federal level to create a rural electrification program, you have a higher rate of success. Not all countries are lucky in that sense. So when we talk about the intersection between technology and energy, it's also the intersection between technology, international development, and the renewable energy sector. It kind of sits in the middle. So for us, for our organization, you know, I kind of mentioned this earlier, we're a little different from other organizations in that we recognize that energy is very technology based, but what we are seeing is the issue with the whole sector and why we haven't succeeded yet is because everyone's kind of looking at it from a technology perspective or a financial perspective and investment perspective and business models. No one's looking at it from a people perspective, and that's where it really fails. Systems in off-grid areas don't fail because you don't have the right technology or you don't have the right investment. I mean, those are good reasons, but even when you have all those things in place, it fails because people they don't have ownership over the system. They aren't included in the process. There's no kind of meaningful community engagement. So our organization kind of sits in this space, and everyone kind of recognizes that community engagement is very important, but I think we're the only ones right now kind of innovating in this space and trying to come up with tools that other organizations can use to really, you know, kind of partner more meaningfully with communities. So yeah, so we're kind of like an intersection between within an intersection and a niche space. Yeah.
That's so very transformative. I can't imagine what the next few years are going to look like for you in this respect. If I'm not mistaken, you also had some educational initiatives, right? Not long ago with solar panels.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do as an organization is also hold educational programs annually. We target young professionals, recent university graduates, And this is sort of our way to encourage more engineers to go into the space of energy access. It's a very multidisciplinary space, and so it's very exciting. You have a wide range of people involved in this space, but we really do need more like engineers who are people focused and people oriented, right? And so that's our kind of contribution, is to hold these annual courses, and they're usually held in off-grid rural communities. It's lots of fun. You get to meet the community and work with them for a whole week. And then we bring in trainers and sort of experts from different parts of the energy access space. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. To change that topic a bit, I wanted to ask you about working from home, because it's a really hot topic. And right now, especially since most of you are in different intersection of these domains, tech has adopted work from home really easily, but everything else, logistics cannot be done from home, and a lot of other parts cannot be done from home. So maybe talk a bit about work from home. Is it good? Is it bad? Are you going to keep it after the pandemic ends? Are you going to maybe do some different off spins, like maybe partly work from home, partly work from the office? How are you going to do this? And I'm going to start with Beatrice this time.
Yeah, so maybe I should say that, or I should start by saying that we're lucky to be in an industry where this is possible. So we're privileged to have this option to work from home, and it's easy to forget that, I guess, in tech circles. Yeah, when it comes to imagiLabs, even from before the pandemic, we had a mixed team, with part of the team being based in Stockholm and part of the team being based in other cities around the world. So we had this mixed remote in-person setup already, and it worked, and it continued to work during the pandemic. So maybe now with a more shift towards working from home, even though for those who are based in Stockholm. Yeah, I think it works well with the things that can be done from home. We were used to using a lot of these tools that help facilitate online work, and I think by now we've become pros at all of these tools. Perhaps one thing that I think becomes very challenging with working from home, especially for young professionals who maybe live alone, is that really there are no boundaries between work and non-work. I think it becomes very hard to create a separation between the hours that you spend working and the hours that you spend doing something else in the same square meters, especially if you don't have other people around to really kind of take your mind off of work, and especially if you can't go somewhere, if you're isolating or in quarantine. So I think what we're still working on and learning how to do is how to kind of create these stricter boundaries for ourselves. And I think this is tough. It's both a team effort, but I think it's individually too, just being able to shut off and ignore everything that's happening online, especially with people working in different time zones. When you're supposed to be off, being able to just ignore them, I think it can be tough.
Wow, this is very interesting, because you don't often see companies and leaders actually thinking about how I can get my employees to actually put a boundary between their life and their work, and actually have a work-life balance that's really good. We often see companies thinking that it's a good thing that people start to work late, but they don't really think about their mental health, and about them not reaching a burnout state, and about them not being exhausted to be actually able to do their work. Maybe you can give a bit of advice here, Beatrice, since you're already working on this. What would you say? How can people actually achieve this?
Well, I think it's difficult, and maybe not. I don't know if there's a one solution fits all. I can say that actually, just yesterday I was having this conversation with my co-founders, how to build a culture of respecting, work-life balance. And I think one part of it is definitely setting an example. So especially as founders, we love what we do, and we started this company because we just really want to solve this problem. So we tend to work, a lot more. But then, what kind of examples does that set for other people in the company who are very passionate, but still, this is not, let's say, like their one worry in life. And so we're trying to send less messages outside of hours. Of course, again, those hours differ for each person. So I do think it's very important for each person individually to understand that they're not expected to be responsive outside of their own working hours. And then maybe that's one rule that needs to be clearly communicated within the team, so that everybody can understand that they can on their own stick to their hours, and they're not expected to be responsive outside. And yeah, just setting an example of not sending messages, not responding to messages when we are supposed to be off, and having this conversation with the team as well.
Definitely, the power of example is really powerful. Cornel, what are your thoughts on work from home, and how is your team coping with it?
Well, I can tell you that I don't believe. Let me put it the other way. In every endeavor I ever had and ever built, I offer full flexibility to everyone. Everyone decides for themselves. We have unlimited vacation. We have unlimited working hours. We can work when we want. We can run when we want. I have people which are waking up at 8 p.m. working until 1 p.m. It works for them. And we have people which are 7 a.m. are awake and they're already in the office. It's actually one of the cool things that in Lumen, at any point there's somebody awake in the same time zone, which is half weird, half not. The moment you offer full flexibility, and when you have incredibly passionate people, you will see them working 12 hours, 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day. And I am not stopping anybody from working. I'm not throwing anyone away to do other things. They choose to themselves what to do. What we are doing, however, is to make sure that they do other things as well by us proposing them and by us building them for them. So we organize a lot of social events remotely, of course, when we can. We do organize a lot of things, not necessarily together, but we just make sure that they do other things, because the moment you have passionate people, you can't tell them stop working. They won't. They will go home and they'll continue working. So it's not in my control to stop them working. Rather, I just make sure that they do other things as well. Example, we have a lot of campaigns going to health. I'm personally making sure each one of them goes to the medic, preemptively goes to the medics as much as possible. We have a lot of campaigns for that. We do volunteering a lot. It's fully so. We take some time from the normal work schedule to do volunteering, and we are doing we're doing activities, some of them together, some of them individually. We are praising voluntary action. We are, I think, not weekly, but roughly once a month, we are storytelling how we helped the environment or how we helped other people outside of Lumen. So this is what some of the things are doing, and we're really building volunteering in our culture. Let me think of other things. We do have a lot of fun together. But getting back to your question about working from home and working from the office, I absolutely love working from the office until I hate it and then I move home. And I think that applies to most of the people. Sometimes it works working from home, sometimes it works working from the office. Of course, we take all the safety precautions. I let everyone choose for themselves. And we have incredibly diverse people. Again, some of them are working in the night, some of them are working in the day, some of them are working in the office, some of them are working literally 2 time zones away, even if they should be here. So I make no rules about that. I just try to build the best environment possible, regardless if it's online or offline for them. And regarding work-life balance, I'm trying to add a bit of life to the work. Otherwise, they will just work. That's the people we have. And we love those kinds of people. This is why we are building this company. We're growing so fast. We find people which are alike in many aspects. Very different in thinking, but very alike in passion.
I'd actually want to ask you a follow-up question on what you just said, because you mentioned that you actually do a lot of remote team buildings and meetings with your team. And of our previous sessions, we actually had a question about this and how do you organize a team building when you have to do it remote? And can you tell us a bit about how you're doing this?
Yes, I can, but I will be doing a bit of, I will do a bit of a commercial to another company. I'm partnering one of the companies of the Ascendis group. For people who are not familiar, Ascendis is the largest, how do you call it in English? The largest company in consultancy in cultural development in Central and Eastern Europe. It's actually a Romanian company, and also the largest team building organizer in, I think, Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe. And when you're partnering that company, you have a bit of advantages. So we have the best people doing that. One of the perks. So I'm not good at that. I just let the best people in the world handle that.
Okay, so outsourcing. That's a really
outsourcing is a solution.
Yeah,
but outsourcing to friends.
Yeah, that's good. Zilla, can you tell us a bit about how you adapted work from home in your team and how it works for you? Because I think you will have a very interesting answer.
I think what Beatrice said, I agree with what she said. Working from home, working from office depends on, you just have to do what works in which situation. It's very easy for our engineering team to work from home because we have also some teams that are remote. But when you find some, like for you to be able to do delivery, you can't do it from home. You have to be in office. But also what I've learned over time. So at the beginning of COVID, we all worked from home, like the entire company worked from home. Then I think 1 month down the road, we started easing the bit of the work rules. So some people are working from office, and now all team leaders work from office, but the rest of the teams still work from home, especially the engineering team. But there's something I learned, that work from home kind of steals away. It's the bit of the collaboration. It's easy for us to discuss online, discuss ideas, and we think that everybody has understood, but it's also different when there's that in-person interaction, which I think working from home doesn't achieve so much, even if there are a lot of tools currently that we are using, but still that collaboration, especially in the product development team, that is very key. You can't get feedback online with a user. It's like Beatrice said, it's very artificial. Sometimes you need to observe and see, and some things people will not tell you. You just have to observe. Yeah, and it's just human nature that when you ask someone, let me tell you about your product, the first thing is, people are generally nice. They'll be like, oh yeah, I love it. But then when you drill down and see them struggling to find a button or figuring out how to send an order, then that's when you realize that, yeah, I think this is not working right. But if you ask them, they'll be like, I like it, but they'll not tell you exactly what they like. And also when you employ a younger team, like very young professionals, sometimes especially people are very passionate, like Cornel said, it's very hard to tell them, okay, now stop, now go home. Yeah, if someone goes home, they'll still continue to work. But the underlying thing is for the company, like the culture we're trying to build, not direct that we're going to do this every month to promote work-life balance, social life, no. But we try to encourage social events. But for now, we try and do it in person. Like we invite the teams that are not remote, they come to office, and yeah, we have like talks, people talk about their challenges, and we try to, and sometimes even we have seen individual employees and their groups, the people ops rally people, and they go, when there is the lockdown, people go out and they bond as employees. But my last comment's a bit tricky especially when the team is young and they're not so professional. Let me say someone is right from school, from campus. They have not yet experienced the working environment. they don't learn so much when they work from home, but they learn more when they observe what you do, they ask more, even in terms of career guidance. So such people, for me, I don't agree so much for them to work from home. But if someone's at a certain level of professionalism, it's very easy. People become responsible, and you don't have to supervise them. They know that they have something to achieve and deliver. You don't have to. But we have seen with the younger professionals, it's a bit hard to achieve working from home.
It's definitely tough. And I'm really glad that you also mentioned the feedback, because you actually have this in common with Beatrice. And I think it's a general problem that many others have. And it's really interesting that everyone has to get creative here too with getting really good and quality feedback and actually getting to the source of what people like and what people don't like. How about you, Ayu? Can you tell us about your experience with working from home, and possibly, because you mentioned the 3 countries, maybe touch on that too, how you synchronize there?
Yeah, so our team actually, right now we're across 6 time zones, and it's been really challenging. I think our organization, just like Beatrice said, the leaders have to kind of set the example and the culture for the organization. And so we've always been an organization that strives to achieve work-life balance and encourages people to, kind of set working hours and do other things. One of the ways that we're very particular is your weekends are your own. And we generally don't bother people during weekends. In the event that we do have something over the weekend, then I usually really, really encourage them to take days off, equivalent to the time that they have had to work over the weekends. And I practice this even throughout the week too. If someone works at night, the next day, come in late and things like that. We do try and set working hours, not necessarily to limit them or anything like that or restrict them, but it's more for other people to know when they are on and off. And so we just expect during those hours for them to be responsive. Not necessarily we expect them to like physically be there. And so these are some of the ways that we've tried to, even though we've shifted to working from home, we still maintain these kind of values where, you have your hours, you just need to let people know when they are, if they've shifted, and then try and keep to them as much as possible. We shifted to Slack. We have very organized channels for everything. So anything that's not work related is not Slack. So everything that's not work related is on WhatsApp. On Slack, we also do have a channel specifically for water cooler conversation. So that's to just kind of mimic the, sort of like the more casual conversation, might be sparking off ideas and discussions about work. So, how I mentioned also that we've used this last year to kind of shift our focus. We've also reorganized our team into the product development team and the programs deployment team. And I definitely noticed that the product development team, having a lot of software engineers, they've taken to working from home a lot quicker, and it's kind of second nature to them. But it's been really tough for our deployment/programs team because they're so used to working with people, and not being able to go to the office is really hard on them. And they really like each other as well. We all kind of really love each other, and so we miss seeing each other in person and in the office. So I think after this, we will probably keep some of the flexibility. But I think that some people are going to opt to go back to the office and work in person, just because that's just the nature of their work. They need to be always kind of interacting with people. Yeah.
It's certainly changed a lot of social dynamics, and it's going to change our patterns, definitely. Yeah. Now, I'm curious because I think each and every one of you is going through either some transformation or a launch of something. So launching during COVID, threat or opportunity? What do you think? And I'm going to start with Beatrice because she already mentioned she did a launch.
Yes, and I think my answer is both. As yeah, we already talked about, so we have a product that perhaps can do very well during these times. I'm not sure if we did as well as we could. It's hard to measure because we don't really have another point of comparison. But of course, we try to kind of use the current situation as a challenge for us to really provide people something that they can do at home. I mean, for children and teenagers to use their time to learn something. And actually, I think learning to code is like among the top things that people have been picking up during like isolation and quarantine. So we're really trying to kind of be there as a tool. But yeah, of course, it's a threat. There have been a lot of unexpected delays and the circumstances that we have to learn to deal with. And it's just, I guess, how it is as an entrepreneur, and maybe even more so during a pandemic. So we just have to deal with it.
Yeah, as with everything, it comes with ups and downs. And Cornel, you said you are preparing for a launch as well, and that you're hoping that the market bounces back a bit. Do you perceive any challenges or opportunities in your future for this launch?
Yes and no. You asked if COVID is opportunity or a threat. I say COVID is part of life right now. It doesn't no longer matter if it's opportunity or a threat. It's life. But comparing to how things would have been 2 years ago, threat for us at least. I mean, we still, whatever we do, we have to prove physically, and it's has to be used physically. So definitely a threat. I don't see opportunity specifically for us, but we just learn to live with it. I mean, it's been over a year, I think. I don't remember a time before. I mean, of course, we all do remember a time before, but after 1 year doing this, it's hard to remember a time before this. So for us, it's life and it's a threat, and we are managing it as good as possible. But I can totally understand, depending on other things which are doing, COVID can be an opportunity, a sad opportunity, a tragical opportunity, but an opportunity nevertheless.
We make the best of what we have. It's just life, as you said. Zilla, I know you recently went through a launch in India. Can you talk a bit about that? And if you had challenges, if there were specific opportunities for you?
I think the major challenge we had was, of course, like Cornel said, COVID is the way of life. It's the grandmaster of all the problems. Yeah, but so we were supposed to launch in November last year, but we had to push it to this year because we weren't ready. There was a bit of delay in terms of development, people trying to adjust, work from home, trying to get to test, and then there were a bit of delays also setting up our operations in India, trying to get someone in charge of the office, the country manager for India and all that. So it took us a bit of time. We thought that it would be a walkover to just go look for someone, advertise, and then there'll be so many people, and of course then we'll get the person we want. Of course we advertised, there were so many who applied, but then it was very hard to get the candidate we are looking for. So we finally got, and yeah, then we were able, because with that delayed, so it delayed us for the launch date, but we finally did. And I think it was successful. It was more virtual than, it was more virtual. It was less of physical and all the fanfare. We tried to limit the launch event generally. But overall, it was successful. Of course, the delays were just in terms of the HR, but also the testing, the limitation, the testing. And I think India, there was a time that the farmers in India actually striked, and then also that delayed us. We had to first wait for the situation to calm down before we enter a new market. Yeah, but at the end of the day, we were successful.
A new market and a huge market.
Yeah, very huge. It's like 100 times our country. Actually, from the time, it's barely 2 weeks since we launched, and the number of users is like huge. You're like, okay, this is where we need to have done this like some time back. Yeah, the market is huge.
I'm glad you managed to do the launch, because it's phenomenal, and going to a new market with so many uncertainties. I think it's been a great ordeal for you, but worth it, definitely worth it. And Ayu, moving on to you. So you're going through this whole transformation from an NGO to a for-profit. All of this during a pandemic. Threats, opportunities, what lies ahead?
So I think it's been an opportunity in the last year, just because it's given us the time that we needed. But I think if this continues, it's going to be a threat, just because I think a lot of the funding in this sector, it's going to be sort of delayed and slowed down, just while people are trying to see what happens and how this plays out, especially since this delays sort of a lot of the installations and infrastructure implementation on the ground. And so then funding is also going to kind of follow that trend. That's kind of what I anticipate. So we're also kind of getting a little angsty, like trying to see what's happening and where we can access the funding that we need to continue with our trajectory. And we may need to start accessing actually like the tech sector, and kind of positioning ourselves slightly differently. But we're still also going to be very careful, just because we know that coming from the NGO side of things, we're not going to scale as quickly as tech startups normally do. So we're going to be looking for very patient investors. Yeah.
Funding is always a problem, isn't it? But during a pandemic, even more so. So the last question before we move on to the Q&A. Any advice for business owners in these trying times? Are you?
Well, I think we all kind of know now that COVID, it has changed the world permanently, right? It's not really going to go back to what it was before. I think that actually, as we do this, we're going to have, like, as we design businesses and all that, I think we're going to have to be very, very honest with ourselves. In seeing the reality of the world and what it is now, and not just thinking of what it could be, especially in the context of what it was before. So I think we're like, honesty is just going to have to really be stepped up from now on. Like yeah.
Honesty, yes, definitely. Zilla, what are your thoughts? So any advice for business owners?
So I think I'm reluctant to give advice. So in this trying time, in most cases, when you launch a business, anything can happen. Like 1,000 things can go right and 1,000 things can go wrong. So you just have to kind of adapt, pivot, and survive, because things get better. Bad times don't last forever, as well as good times. So you just have to be in a position where you're not so rigid. When situations change, you adapt and find a creative way of always overcoming the challenges. As long as you're in entrepreneurship itself is a risk. So by the time you go into doing entrepreneurship, that means you have to have the thick skin, you have to be ready for the uncertainties, because at the end of the day, the rewards also are very high. So the higher the risk, the higher the rewards. So as long as you can adapt, as long as you have a great team, I can't emphasize that enough. As long as you have a great team that are passionate and that can stick around no matter the situation, I think you have the greatest resource to work with. And that's what we have seen in these times. Yeah. So you build a team. You build a team, then the team will build the product for you.
That is amazing. And I hope everyone finds amazing teams such that each and every one of you have. So we have up until now, honesty, adaptability. Cornel, what is your advice?
Advice for people starting now?
For business owners in general in these trying times. You can refer either to startups or even more established businesses, or you can just say, hey, for business owners that are in a startup like my own, this is my
Understood. I would say a lot in the direction of really make sure you have passion for what you do, because entrepreneurship in general, especially in, I'm not saying the startups are harder, but especially in the startup scene, any rational person would quit. Any rational person being an entrepreneur, any rational person being a startup founder would quit. So really make sure that you're passionate about what you're doing and make sure that this is what you want to do, because inevitably you will get to problems which really make you wonder, why the heck did I do this? And for me, it's happening 5 times a day. 5 times a day, I'm asking myself, why the heck did I do this? Why didn't I just stay in corporations and live happily ever after there? Or any other profession in the world, because there are so many things which you can do, and just make sure in the right direction. Otherwise, as long as you have passion and you have great, I think everything else is solvable. But really make sure you love what you do, because otherwise you cannot rationally explain to someone why you're doing it.
That's a quite fun answer. And now moving on to Beatrice, which advice would you give to business owners?
I agree with everything that was mentioned already. And perhaps something I can add is that I think the thing that business owners and founders and entrepreneurs have in common is the fact that we adapt to change, and maybe moreover, we seek change. That's why we're entrepreneurs in the first place. So I almost think it's our duty to set an example for adapting to change and for creating business models that are accommodating to the new reality that we live in. So yeah.
It is what it is.
And be an example. Yeah.
I really like that. I really like that advice. And now we can move on to the Q&A session, and each speaker has can give one prize. We have prizes from Creative Tim, which are licenses to Material Kit Pro. These are basically web pages, and they're equipped with Bootstrap, and they're really pretty, and you can use them in your whatever projects you have. Actually, we used one for a personal project, so it's really, really nice. So I'm going to be reading the questions that are in the chat in order. So there's a really long one from Irina, but I think I can summarize it. So Irina mentions that, and this one is for Cornel, that employers are obliged by the law to have strict time slots and not and regulate the way workers work and not work more than 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week. And there are penalties and taxes. And she asks, what's your opinion on this? I am asking because you said you will not stop anyone from working 16 hours a day. And that honestly sounds a bit extreme capitalism. And she also doubts that someone is performant long-term if they constantly work at this rate. So how do you manage?
Sure. Let me answer that. First of all, it's not that I won't stop, it's that I can't stop. It's a difference. Maybe by mistake I said won't. I apologize for that. You can't stop, or you can't stop a person who really wants to work. They will just find ways of doing it. So what you can do is do the best into making sure that they have everything they need, that they have other things except work. And this is what we're trying. And this is the difficulty working with very passionate people. They will always work, regardless if it's for the challenges they have or for other things that they find passionately. I see them working and I tell them not to, and they won't stop, they won't listen to me. So that would be my second part of the answer. It's not that I don't want to stop them, it's that you can't stop passionate people from doing what they love. Regarding regulations, of course there are regulations, and of course we're trying to respect them as well as possible, with flexible. I mean, there is the way of doing things, or the social way of doing it, and the concepts and everything we have, and then there's the legal way of doing things, and that's unfortunately in Romania, especially, two different. You're complying to the rules. These are two different subjects, and large corporations will know they actually have people specifically to see how they say that they're compliant to something which they're not necessarily in. I do agree with the rules. I mean, it has been proven historically 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, it's a good time. I personally believe humans can work more than that. I'm not making humans work more than that. I just let them choose what's the best for them. Also, at the same time, 8 hours a day is what works for most people. There are people who are incredibly efficient working 4 hours a day and then just taking the rest of the time off. And in those 4 hours, they do more than I do in 12. I'm incredibly inefficient. I work more. So more hours, not more work. I deliver less and more time. So I think individually giving the flexibility to everyone to choose. And by flexibility doesn't mean that, of course, there are time schedules and everything. You know, legally we are reporting the normal working hours, and exactly this is the time slot. You can work whenever you can in it, whenever you want in it, and that's bound by law, and we respect that. So we don't have people out after the latest hour in the office, and we don't have people before. But during the pandemic, when everyone is working from home, I see people online at any time. So legally speaking, we're doing our best. Morally speaking, we have people which just want to work, and we're making sure that they're healthy. We're making sure they're doing other things by actually offering them the other things. It's difficult to work with passionate people, but it's also a blessing.
Could I jump in? And I have a few things I'd like to maybe add to this as well. And
also,
I think,
can I, the most important question, do you think that somebody who's working 16 hours a day can actually perform long-term? Because the answer is no, regardless of passion. And passion without a good set of rules around it lead to psychological burnout.
I think I'm not a doctor to answer that question. I think some people in the work could work 16 hours a day, but that's a medical question, no longer a moral question. Short answer is no. People working 16 hours a day most probably get very inefficient very fast. I work at many hours a day and I'm incredibly inefficient. I try working less and I found out that I'm even less efficient. So I think I'm just built to kind of make up that I'm working for like 12, 14 hours a day. And that's usually how many times I spend working. Like my screen time is roughly 14, 15 hours a day. But that's just for me personally. It doesn't work for everybody. But yes, you're right. Brian says no, you can't work 16 hours a day all the time.
Beatrice, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something very short. And I think this idea of, like full flexibility and unlimited vacation is very common among tech startups. And I think in kind of in theory, it sounds like a very good idea. And actually, I think Netflix, I'm not sure how many people are into this whole idea of culture and building culture, but Netflix is a very good example of this, putting this in practice, full flexibility and unlimited vacation. And the way they do that is actually without having rules, speaking of rules, which I think Irina mentioned. And it's very interesting that a company can accomplish that. And I think it links to what Cornel was saying about having people in the team who are able to understand what they can do on their own and what their limits are and how many hours they can work at one time and so on. But I do think it's actually very difficult to put this in practice. And it's important to have not only opportunities for like the team to do other things, so activities like Cornel was mentioning, but also showing an example of doing these activities. So I think another example, again from Netflix, is that with vacation, the leadership definitely makes an effort to take long vacations and often take vacations and also talk about them and show the rest of the team that, okay, I went on vacation and I didn't work. So, again, I think the power of examples from the leadership are really important in order to allow people to develop these work habits or processes that involve less rules and full flexibility and so so on.
May I just add 30 seconds? But I think this will backfire a lot on me. It's already backfiring, so the heck, let's go full throttle. We are actually bringing a lot of our hobbies to the office, and it's something which I insist on is working very well for us. So I just have to like take my hand like 2 meters from here, and I have 3 instruments which I personally play. A lot of people have brought their hobbies. We have a lot of people who are into how do you call, like climbing mountains and everything, and we actually have ropes on our building so they can actually go between floors in a safe way. Don't go much in detail. Don't ask me many things. We have bicycles indoors because a lot of us love bicycles. We are bringing all of our hobbies here so that during work we're actually having a lot of fun, and we're building a culture about individual diversity and preference and diversity here. Of course, diversity means so many more things, but when it comes to passions, we try to bring them here, which are not related to work. And this really creates a lot of intellectual diversity, passion diversity in the office. And for the few of us who are coming in the office, it's really, really cool to see how people find pleasure in things which you never knew about. And then you learn about them. And it's really, really helping with creativity, with, I would say work-life balance, but it's life happening at work. So I don't know if that is a thing, but it is working for us.
I would like to add, of course, if Silvia agrees, from my experience of working on the campus in Google, because that actually overlaps quite well over what Cornel says about bringing your whole self and hobbies to work. And I can even add about how easy Google makes it to have everything there so that you never leave, including dinner. There is an impact, and that impact, I mean, it's great and it's fun, especially when you're a foreigner or someone new in a city that doesn't have any other people to connect with. And so the work becomes their entire world, and the social connections become their entire world at work. As a result of that, your personal identity overlaps with the work identity. And it will only be a problem when you leave that environment or when you realize that your entire social system is work. And that is detrimental to you as a person. To the company that does that, no, it's not. It's actually, they get more value out of you. You stay there longer. So from my experience of working with people that have burnouts at Google, that group is called Blue Dot. It is not recommended to drink the company Kool-Aid if you want to have a good mental health. So I hope this makes sense. It's just my own experience as a mentor for health stuff there.
I fully agree with Irina, by the way.
Yeah,
but it doesn't mean I'll do it on myself.
I think we can cut this off a bit because I know IU wants to say something too, and maybe we can let Zilla have an input too. I don't know if she wants to, but I'm gonna ask her about that after IU, so we can hear their input on this too. IU?
Yeah, so it's kind of related to what Irina says. I think one of the reasons why our organization comes at it from a very different perspective is because myself and my co-founder, we have families and we have small kids actually, and so that's why we sort of like insist on this work-life balance. We too have a rec room in our office with couches and fun stuff, but we also want people to have a life outside of the circle that we have at work. I'm gonna talk about something from a different perspective here. Cornel, you were talking about how some people can work 16 hours, some people can work 4 hours, inefficiencies basically. Something that we do with our team is actually when they do a task that doesn't follow the timeline that was anticipated, we actually ask them to reflect. And try and support them and give them the tools so that they become more efficient according to whatever they think, like a level of efficiency that they're comfortable with. And so that's actually attacking it from a slightly different perspective, where instead of kind of expecting people to follow their own timelines and efficiencies, we want them to actually look at themselves honestly and think about whether they feel they're using their time well, and whether they could use it better so that they have time for other things also, not just work, but like outside of work. And so I think it's important to do that, because that's also capacity building within your organization, because you're recognizing that people want to improve and not necessarily just use time however they want. Maybe they need help with time management and other things. Just so as leaders, like, we try to actually support them to do that also. That's, yeah.
That's really interesting. And it's really interesting that you're so involved in their mental health and actually thinking about this and analyzing this data and looking at their patterns of work to help them not reach the burnout state. Zilla, I'm curious if you faced something like this, and what are your thoughts on this?
I think the reality is it's hard to achieve work-life balance. That's the reality, especially in a startup environment where you have a few months runway and then you have a few months from closing the next investment, and you need to keep the company afloat. The best thing is to try progressively to build it as a culture within the organization. So what we have done proactively is to encourage our employees who have kids. We have a small nursery in office. So all the employees who have kids can be able to bring their babies up to 1 year, because that's when they are very fragile. So you can bring your babies to work, and then we have a nanny that we have employed who is always there, well trained, and can be able to look after the kids. But we have done it more from the gender perspective, because we realized most of our key employees got babies at the same time, and we also needed them to be productive, and we didn't want them to stay at home. So that's what we did. And also in the spirit of trying to ease a bit of the pressure in office. In a startup, there's always pressure. There's always some fire you're trying to put out. So we have like an innovation center where people can be able to play. We brought like a pool table, something simple, bean bags for people to rest and relax. But the truth is, you can't achieve. I've been to Google's offices a couple of times. I've been to Microsoft offices. You can look at the way the office is set up, and that's where you want to go, but you don't have the kind of resources as a startup to achieve everything that Google has. They have food, you can gym, you can literally you can live your life in office without moving. They have memberships that you don't have to worry about what you need to wash your clothes. Like, all those things are well catered for an employee. So you try and cut your coat according to your size. So we are trying to do it. I don't think we are yet at that level. But I think when we become bigger and get more resources, that's where I want to be, at least for me. But in terms of burnout, I see it more from the side of the founders than the employees directly. You are trying to increase the valuation of the company, you're trying to keep the employees happy, you're trying to run your family, you're trying to be a good friend, you're trying to attend someone's wedding. Like, it's hard. Like, it's hard to have, it's hard to contain all that as a person. Yeah, so I think you do it progressively, step by step. You don't have to be everyone's friend. You don't have to be available for everyone. Today your friend is getting married, you have to attend. Then investment meetings, you have to be there. Then the employee has something, you have to, like, it's a lot. So I see that more from, at least from the founder circle that we have talked about it. I see the burnout more from the founders. We have tried to shield the employees from that kind of burnout. I don't think we're yet there, but we shall eventually get there. Yeah.
I'm really glad you touched a bit on burnout, and we do have 2 more questions if you allow me to, a few more minutes. And I'm going to start with Loredana's and then get back to Elena's, because Loredana's question actually relates to burnout. It was targeted at Cornel because of all the talks, but I think everyone and every one of you can answer it. So let's see. have you ever had employees that faced burnout, and how did you deal with it? And Zilla, you mentioned founders. Do you want to extrapolate on that?
Oh yeah, I think myself. I think I have ever. I think I've ever. Sometimes the pressures of being entrepreneur, it's very high. People don't talk about. You see, when you try to talk about the reality of being a startup entrepreneur, founder, people can shy away from building cool stuff. Yet everyone's supposed to be. So yeah, I think it was around 2018. Or at a time when we're looking for investment, we're trying to keep the company afloat. We're working literally, I think it was only like, we literally worked from Monday to Sunday to try and put everything, yeah? And also what I've learned, you see these big corporations that we admire. When you talk to the founders, like the first guys who worked, I don't think there was a luxury of saying, now this is where I stop. Sometimes what makes you stop is that you have achieved something and makes you feel so good that you take yourself out, go and relax. Like it's just part of being entrepreneur. So what we did, we have a mentor, we have a company mentor that we talk to, and then of late we have become friends with our investors, so we can talk about the realities of things that are happening in the company and the advisors. Fortunately, one of the investors was once a startup founder, so he understands the pressures that come with founding a company. So we seek help. We talk a lot to the mentors, like a lot about the challenges, about what is not moving, what is moving. And then also we have tried to prioritize family. Yeah. But now that was before, but now that when we got investment, we got a bit of breathing space. And then we got there was just some peace of mind that comes with having sufficient runway. And yeah, but sometimes it's hard as a startup, looking at, you have 53 employees who might be out of job in case you don't raise money. That is motivation enough for you to keep working. You get, yeah.
It's
100% agreeing with that,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah, and that's a whole lot of pressure for you, I'm sure. Cornel, very briefly, did you have employees with burnout, and how did you deal with it?
Not in Lumen. Just to clarify one thing, I'm not such a bad person. I'm not a bad boss over working people, even if maybe some parts of the conversation led in that direction. I'm not that person. Before, but we were in a very large organization which had all the required assistance in order to solve that. Was it by my making? I don't know. It's true. The examples I'm giving to the employees which we have, the colleagues, not the employees, they're my colleagues in the end. To the colleagues we have is that personally I work a lot. My co-founders give other impressions, and we kind of get this very diverse. I'm the youngest person leading the company. Then my co-founder is 20 years older than me, and then the other co-founder like 10 years older than me. So we're in various stages of life and various stages of implication, and our colleagues see that. They see the examples which my co-founder gave, they see the examples which I give, and everyone chooses hopefully the best, but some of them the worst in us. So I really hope we will not have to deal with burnout. We are not a large enough organization to deal with that. It's harder for us to get specialized support to help people there. And when it comes to burnout, as any other kind of affection which really impacts your life, you should get the best support possible. So hopefully we'll not get there. Before we were in such situations. It was not pleasant, hopefully not by my making, but probably was. But we're lucky enough to have specialized support back then. So I'm not an expert in dealing with burnout. Luckily, I never had a burnout on myself, and I really hope not to see it on the people which we have.
Thank you for that really heartfelt moment and the personal example. Beatrice, have you had any encounters with burnout, and how did you deal with it?
Actually, yes, I have a few personal examples that I can briefly mention, and I'm not sure if there's a size of a company at which you should start thinking about burnout. I think in our case, this is something that maybe we encountered pretty early on. So I had a few rough months, let's say myself, and I think what really helped was my co-founders and getting support from my co-founders. I think, you know, there are intense periods where we work on, we have tight deadlines. And so I think, yeah, burnout can happen in many different forms and to anyone. So in my case, really just having supportive co-founders was really, really important. We also recently had someone else on the team who we think might have experienced burnout. And there, I think the problem was that we were setting an example of working a lot. So in that case, the employee felt that they should do the same. And, you know, it just gradually led to a moment where you realize that, wow, I have been working a lot and this is not sustainable. So I think it can manifest in different forms. And I think just talking about it and openly with the team and really encouraging people to yeah, take weekends off, take some time off really, really helps. And I think that maybe goes to the other question that we have here from Elena about starting and where to start. If you have an idea, I really think that just surrounding yourself with people who will support you is so important, because it's going to be really rough and you're going to have really, really hard times. And if it's just so much harder on your own. So if you have 1-2 people that you can start with and have each other's backs when it gets rough, which is a lot, I think that's really the one tip I would give for that question.
Yeah, that's very true. Sorry, Zilla, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to compliment what Beatrice has said. So I'm a computer engineer. Everything I knew before was in engineering, very little in agriculture, like literally very little in agriculture. So when we started, I think one of my projects in at university was around we're trying to build a sensor to help detect cows that were on heat. So in that process, I think we started building on that we try to seek out like agricultural experts. So we looked for mentors who are good in agriculture, like they understood the agricultural market very well, how it played. And I think for the first 5 months of starting, we did everything ourselves. We went and lived the lives of the farmers, went to the hills where they grow, tried to understand their lifestyle, how do they think, how do they work, what is their perception around technology. So starting out in an area that you're not so sure of, let me say, for example, you're an engineer and you want to start in health. The first thing is, if the customers you're targeting are in the health sector, you try and live their life, talk to them a lot, figure out what is it that they're doing, what is their value. So you try and understand, you try and read, do research, but also when bringing on employees, bring the ones who have strength in what you're lacking. You don't need to be an expert at whatever you're at the industry where you are, but provided you know the value you're providing, so you try and get the employees in to fill in the weaknesses that you don't have, where you're not good at. But you try and read, research, talk to people like Beatrice has said, get mentors in that area where you want to go. Yeah.
Definitely. I also resonate with what Beatrice said, and mostly coming from there are parts of our culture that are very toxic, and through this culture, we are not allowed to talk about our mental health state. And it's really tough if you're going through a burnout to not talk with someone. And as Zilla mentioned, we need mentors for this to normalize having burnout and going through it, and how to get back on track. And as Beatrice said, we need people close to us who can guide us through this, because we might get there. We don't know how we can get there, but we need to be able to get out, and people around us can help us with this. Ayu, do you also have some thoughts on this?
On was it how to deal with burnout, or
Yeah. So if you dealt with people who had burnout in your company, if you helped them in any way, or if it got there.
Yeah, I mean, in our organization, I mean, in our team, we try and make sure that people feel safe enough to be really honest with each other. And I know I've touched on honesty before, but I mean, this is actually a really important thing, especially since a lot of us are very people facing. Like we deal with, marginalized, sometimes vulnerable communities. So in order to be able to work effectively with them, we have to also be sort of effective ourselves and be healthy, mentally ourselves. And so we are always encouraging each other to be very honest with each other. And so if anybody feels overwhelmed, just trying to get them to recognize the triggers before they reach the stage where they need additional support. And so, I mean, just this week, someone actually did come out and tell me that, like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Can I take the day off? Absolutely. I mean, it's much better if the person takes time off and comes back and is able to work and contribute, rather than face burnout and then deal with the fallout from that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and now that we touched on burnout, we actually have a use case for the honesty and how we can apply it. And I really like that you got here. Sorry for keeping you so much after this, after our timeline. So we do have one more question if we can go through it, but also I want to mention to all our participants that if you want to get in touch with our speakers, you can always contact us, and we can make an intro for you. And also they're always seeking talent, and if you are interested in what they're doing and interested in helping them achieve what they're doing, feel free to drop us a line and we'll get you in touch. So as I mentioned, there is just one last question. If you want to answer it, it would be really nice. So Elena V says that, following from the question about what advice would you give to businesses, what advice would you have for someone who has an idea they feel passionate about, but it's in a field they don't have much experience in and don't know where to start, particularly for someone who has passed their student years and has been working in a different field? And I do believe Zilla actually touched a bit on this a bit earlier in one of the questions. And I also know that Zilla is in a really tight timeline and she's going to need to go soon. So maybe if you want to touch on this briefly.
And actually talked about it briefly. So it's all up. You can't be good at everything. So you just have to identify. So as a founder, just like the way you do market research, you have to do a bit of research, find the mentors in that space, live the lives of the customers that you'd want to serve, because at least that's what we did. Like all the founders, the three of us were all engineers, and everything we knew was code. But we had to learn the customers that we are providing. We're going to provide the services too. So you just have to do a bit of research. The employees that you bring on board, make sure that they have the strength where you lack, and then get mentors in that area, because then also talk to the people in that space. You're not the first person, definitely not the first person in that space. So you talk to people a lot in that space. You learn a lot. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Zilla. And yeah, it's opportunity for growth. Cornel, do you have any advice for someone who wants to, who is passionate about something but requires to change the domain to do it?
It's the only reason of starting. I never done something in my life which I knew how to do. That's the beauty of it. Why do something you know? You will never be able to innovate in something you know. Innovation never comes from experts. If you're an expert in that field, you'll never innovate in that field. So only do things which you don't know how to do. And I think that's actually entrepreneurship, doing things that you don't know how to do.
Definitely. Beatrice?
And
oh, sorry, did you want to follow up? Okay. Beatrice, do you want to touch on this?
Yeah, I like what Cornel said, and I agree. And I also agree with what Zilla mentioned. I think it's, and just going back to my previous point about having a team. So yeah, finding people who perhaps have different like skills, complementary skills, but also just people that you really want to spend a lot of time with working on something, because it will take time and effort to build out your idea. Perhaps another thing is to keep your problem in mind, and again, just as Zilla mentioned, trying to understand the people or whoever is experiencing that problem and focus on that and not your idea. I think as an entrepreneur, it's easy to just think your idea is the best, but forget about the problem that you're solving. So keep that in mind.
Really powerful messages tonight. Ayu, your opinion?
Yeah, I agree with everything. I mean, what Zilla said with do your market research, find your mentors, and Cornel being about, doing something new, just also for the sake of learning new things and being able to add to it, because you come from a different perspective, and jumping into something new means that you can innovate, right? And I also agree with Beatrice, like, surrounding yourself with people whom you want to learn from and you want to work with. I think also finding opportunities to other opportunities to learn. So for example, I mean, I also shifted from like kind of aerospace to energy. And so, I really like kind of pushed myself to find forums, conferences, things like that, just where you can meet more people and also hear people speak and kind of learn the lay of the land and map out the whole sector and space. So yeah, I think finding all those opportunities everywhere you can.
Definitely. And I love how each of you sees it as an opportunity to learn, because I think that state of mind does wonders for you. And so that concludes our panel tonight. We had only 3 questions, and I know we had 4 prizes. So basically everyone won. No need for I don't know, choosing, but I really liked our conversation tonight, and I'm sorry we went a little over the time, but I really think it was it was really worth it, and thank you so much for being here. For the participants, I'll see you in the raffle in precisely 1 or 2 minutes, I guess. So thank you, everyone. Bye.